Ah, that was the problem. Hey, Lori, I see him now.
Hi.
Oh, it's just amazing, this war between Edge and Chrome. I mean, it's like Edge is determined they're going to take over the Chrome access.
Seems
And
like it.
oh, it's so aggravating. There's Robin. Come on, Ishmael, where are you, dear? I feel so bad that I've been seeing that issue. I had to get a new computer the other day. My computer died, and so now everything wants to come up Edge, and I use Chrome, and I apparently that's the issue. It wouldn't read the PDFs from the location where I had them. So that's where our problem was. So we'll wait just a minute till Ishmael comes back in. But at least I found the forms. Can you see my screen now? Not yet.
I see KW, that's it.
Oh,
and my
come
camera's
on.
working now. That was bizarre.
Yeah, now I see you.
Where are you?
Yeah, where me? That is just weird, isn't it? Because now it's just showing KW, not showing me, isn't it?
Right.
Oh my land sakes alive. Well, that's not going to be fun. You don't want to just look at, not that I'm not much better looking, but that KW is not what you want to look at. Let's see.
That is so funny.
Oh my land sakes alive. I don't know why. Why wouldn't it show me? Well, I feel absolutely stupid today, girls. I am so sorry. Now we know why we like to do things in person. I thought that there was a way that we could that I could change that, but I guess not. Is there not a way I can change whoever is on KW? Start video. I did it. I see Robin. Does Robin see me?
There you are. My camera's
Lori.
broken, or I'd be up there too.
I tell you what, the things you get to learn on a North Carolina listing class. Oh, mercy me. Okay, now let's see if I can get you all to be able to see the forms. That's the next thing, isn't it? And it keeps telling me to launch the meeting. Do you see where it's telling me to launch the meeting? Can you see that? Do you see anything about that?
I see your screen that says launch the meeting.
Yeah, that's what it's telling me too.
Yeah.
But it's not letting me in. No, I don't want to end the meeting. I want to start it, you silly thing. It shouldn't. Well, I have never in my life seen such an aggravating thing. We are screen sharing. Can you see the picture? Can you see the, really?
I can see it.
Oh, glory, glory, glory. Mercy, but we lost Ishmael. Oh my goodness. I hope it didn't block him coming back in. Well, I don't know how to get him. That's obviously I'm having trouble getting myself on here. Oh, I hope we didn't totally lose him. Well, we can start anyway. I have detained you all long enough as I've tried to fiddle with this thing. I promise I'll try to work it out between now and next Thursday when we talk about the buyers. The pre-listing package, I know Robin is probably more familiar with this than Lori might be. A pre-listing package, I think, is one of the handiest things you ever use, because when you're going to take a listing, it can take hours to get all this paperwork and get all this information. So when I first came to KW years ago, I was introduced to this concept. It's like a two-step listing. And I just loved it from day one because it simplified my being able to talk to the people about the things that were urgent, like the listing agreements. But you've got all these disclosures and you've got information you want to, because you spend a lot of time educating sellers. You know, some of them think they already know it. You know, that some of them have already sold houses before, but they may not have sold houses in North Carolina. And then you've got the other issue. They may just think they know, but things change even in North Carolina, you know, so it's real important that you have this mindset of educating the sellers, okay? And I think it has worked well for me and for a lot of folks in KW. Gary Keller taught us this, like I said, years ago. If you will put together a packet of forms, you can either deliver that. There's Ishmael, there he is. If you will, I'm so glad we didn't lose you. I was afraid I couldn't get you back, Ishmael. I'm glad you're here.
Glad to be back.
Okay, I finally got the forms up, and so we were just starting to talk a little bit about what we call a pre-listing package. If you can put together a file, if you're using DocuSign, you can put together, you know, put you a template in there. Leah Bass did, no, it's not Bass anymore. Leah with Julia Productions did a wonderful class yesterday afternoon. I don't know if you had a chance to get it. If you didn't, text me and I'll send you a recording of it. If you can put a template together, you know, that you use a lot, that will be real helpful to you. But basically in this pre-listing pack, like I say, some of us deliver it in person. I would hesitate to recommend doing it in person because the seller's then going to want you to talk. And the only thing the seller wants to know is, what can you sell my house for and how fast can you sell it? But you've got to educate them. You got to get a lot of stuff from them before you ever get to those answers to those questions. So on the pre-listing package, you want to send it possibly in your forms program, your e-signature program, or you want to maybe have it delivered. Sometimes I'll do that, the 2-day delivery mail, whatever, for $4.50 and deliver it to them if I have enough time. And I think Lori said she has a little time on her, so she might be able to do that. Or you can drop it off at the front door. And then text them or call them and say, I left you a package at the front door, just some information to get you started on the listing. So anyway, in the pre-listing package, you want to obviously have some marketing material about yourself. Right. And we're not going to talk about that today because that's what you get from your coaches and your classes, your marketing materials. But the forms that you would want to put in there are all your disclosures and some of the little brochures that we give out. And we're going to go through those disclosures right now. I'm getting ready to go through. I do have a list I could give to you, but primarily you are required, even FSBOs for SHPA owners are required to give a residential property disclosure and a mineral and oil and gas rights disclosure. Right. Those are two forms that even someone who's selling the house themselves are required to give. So if you're talking to a seller and they may, for whatever, hey Vincent, they may say, well, I think I don't want to list. I think I'll just do it myself. Good luck. But anyway, remind them that they would have to have these forms, even if they're going to try to do it themselves. And one reason the reason they are required to do it is, you see this little seal right up here? Mm-hmm. That's the seal of North Carolina lawmakers. It's a state seal. That's not a real estate rule. This is a law. And all buyers have a right to see a disclosure given by the seller, signed by the seller. Don't touch it yourself. You're not supposed to fill out anything. You can guide, you can answer questions, but don't you fill this out in DocuSign and then send it over there for the sign. No, no, no. It's their disclosure, not yours, okay? That disclosure, again, it has to be from the seller. Now there's 4 exemptions. An estate, that the administrator would not sign. The foreclosures, the bank, obviously the bank doesn't know anything about the property. They've just foreclosed on the mortgage, okay, and got the property back. If there's if maybe a family member who's lived in the property and they're transferring ownership, obviously they would not have a residential property disclosure. And new construction, those are the 4 areas that you would not need the residential property disclosure. Those same 4 minus 1 would be for the mineral oil and gas. The mineral oil and gas is not required for it is required for new construction. Residential property disclosure is not required for new construction. The mineral oil and gas rights disclosure is required. So when you go, if you take a buyer to a new, new construction home site, sales rep, you do a contract, they're going to present that mineral oil and gas disclosure because it is required. One of the number 1 questions we get on particularly that mineral oil and gas is, well, why is it not required on land? None of us know. The lawmakers just decided not to have it included on land. They're apparently more concerned to protect the consumer's residence on the land than they are land that's been sold. So you do not have, it's not an exemption. It was never a part of it. So you would not have a residential property disclosure or mineral oil and gas on land. All right. That's just some preliminary remarks. Going through this residential property disclosure, notice on the front page here, the seller has a right to check yes if they know that there's an issue, or check no if they don't know of any issue, or they can say no representation. A seller has that right. Sadly enough, they can check no representation if they've decided they don't want to tell. Not so sure that's quite right, but as you can see right here where my little cursor is, if the seller checks no representation, the seller is choosing not to disclose the conditions or characteristics of the property. That seems like it's not quite fair, but they have that right. I guess it's their disclosure, and they have the consequences if things are disclosed. If they found out later that they weren't disclosed, the seller is the one who pays the consequences. Now, let me point this out to you right here. See this little paragraph here? If there's some issues with a house and the seller is opting to put no representation, but you as the agent know of a problem, you are required to tell it, even though the seller has chosen not to. And sometimes the sellers will tell you not to tell. But right here, it clearly says that if they're being assisted in the sale of the property by a licensed real estate broker, the seller knows that they are responsible for delivering it, and the broker must disclose any material facts. If you haven't taken your GIN up yet, and some of you might not even need a GIN up this year, but at the same token, there is I think about half of the GIN up class this year is on material facts. The commission is really bearing down hard on material facts not being disclosed. They are really bearing down and digging deep to make agents aware of what is a material fact and the fact that the agent is responsible to share. There's no form for you to. Typically, that would be done in an email to agents who might be wanting to make an offer in the property. But for the sake of this form, you have to make sure the seller understands that if they tell you of a problem and you've seen an inspection report and there is a problem, then you want to make sure that you CYA your license, okay, and disclose it. Now, that doesn't mean, is there a nail pop somewhere, but some of the water issues, or maybe an issue with that HVAC, or some major issue there. What I'm seeing mostly right now that are being considered material fact are issues with an HOA where there may be a special assessment. Excuse me just a minute. There may be a vote on a special assessment coming up. And you say, well, gosh, that's not even proposed. If they're just saying they may be calling for a vote, the commission is considering that material fact if you know about it, even though it's not proposed, even though it hasn't been voted on, and it certainly is not already a special assessment. And I really think that's where some of the issues coming in right now, because some things haven't been disclosed because they weren't proposed, a proposed assessment. And if you'll remember in our contract, the special assessments do have to be paid by the seller at closing. And so there's some gray area in there now. And so now they're calling it proposed, not proposed, they're calling it material fact. So just be cautious about that. Again, that's to take care of your license, okay? This little area right here, they are really bearing down on listing agents having the residential property disclosure up front before the buyer's agents write the contract or write the offer. There's a 3-day, it's like a 3-day right of rescission. You know, we really don't have such a thing other than some condos at the beach, but the 3-day right of rescission is implied in this particular document, that if the buyer does not get the residential property disclosure prior to writing the offer, there is 3 days that they may be able to exercise their right and terminate the contract and get their due diligence back. This is not part of the due diligence process, all right? So as a listing agent, you make every effort to get that completed and attach it to your listing in matrix so that the buyer's agent has no excuse for not having given it to the buyer when they write the offer. Again, you're just making sure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted by having that available. So now you know why I would say, let's put this in a pre-listing package. Let's get it in the seller's hands as quickly as we can so the seller can start filling it out. It is not an easy, quick thing to fill out. There'll be some details that they're gonna probably have to look up. So, but help them to understand the urgency with which you want to protect them with having it available and in MLS at the time buyer agent writes the contract or the offer. I keep calling it the wrong. I just want it to be contracts, not just offers. Okay. The bottom of this, the signatories here, obviously you can put the property address and the owner's name, which you would type in, and then the owners would sign here. That's what you want to make available on MLS, the signed copy of the residential property disclosure. Then when the buyer makes the offer, the buyer will sign this, and they, in theory, it works very well for them to be able to send the residential property disclosure back to you at the same time they make an offer. It's not required, but it's just makes things nice and tidy that way. Let me show you this little thing right here. You'd be surprised how many times people forget to put the property address up here. So we've got this residential property disclosure that could get lost from this page. We don't know what it belongs to. So make sure you do put the property address. You don't have to put the legal description, but do put the property address. Now let's look at a few of these. One of the things that you do want to address is the year that the dwelling was constructed, and if there's been a change. Every now and then houses are moved, And we're seeing many more times right now that people are actually reconstructing a house from the foundation up, you know. So there's been a lot of people who are going in, as we lovingly call them, flippers, where they're going to flip a house, and they go in and they'll go right all the way to the, like I say, to the foundation. Well, not too long ago, I had a chance to give that question to MLS and to North Carolina Commission. MLS says that any reference to a date in the date that it's constructed has to be the original date. You know, if the house was originally constructed in 1952, but someone built it from the foundation up, rebuilt it from the foundation up last year, you cannot put last year's date. You have to go back to 1952. That is what MLS rules are. All right. You do want to explain that, however, right here. Then you can say originally built in 1952, remodeled from foundation up in 2021, whatever. So that's where you put your explanation. The commission says that if the MLS has a requirement on square footage or on this, we have to go by the MLS rules. That is not what appraisers do. Appraisers will go to the effective life or the effective age, which would be from 2021. So that is confusing, but right now, I want you to put 1952 because that's what MLS requires you to, even though it has been rebuilt from the foundation up. If there's a foundation still there from 52, it's 52. Now, I hope that didn't confuse you on that. And here he says, is there any problem, malfunction, or defect with the foundation, the slab, the fireplaces? Watch these chimneys. There are a lot of MLS listings that you'll see where the chimneys are, it'll say chimney sold as is. Well, if that's a quick alert to you as a buyer's agent to make sure to get that chimney inspected. As a listing agent, that is also something you might want to consider, particularly if the chimney is older. Go ahead and put it in the remarks and talk to your seller that it's being sold as is, because maybe the seller doesn't know that there's any problem with the chimney because he hasn't had it inspected. Or if he has inspected, we had this not too long ago as well. They had it inspected, actually had it cleaned, and the person who cleaned it didn't tell them there was a crack in it. And so that caused a problem, obviously, when the listing agent had said the chimney had recently been cleaned, you know, because that sounds like a really good marketing point. And then the person who came in to inspect it said, but there's a crack in the firebox, you know, so they had to settle that little discrepancy there. So I would say if that house has any age on it at all, I would say chimney sold in as is condition. All right. Obviously there's things with the doors and the windows. How about the broken seals in the windows? If the seller knows that he has a couple of windows that the seal is broken, he needs to say there is an issue and then come down here. Wait a minute, let me get down here a little bit. He would come down here right at the end of this long list of things and make a note right here that there are broken seals in 2 windows. That doesn't mean he's going to fix it. That doesn't mean he has fixed it. It just says he's disclosing that he knows that there are 2 broken seals on the windows. And of course, obviously the buyer's going to want it fixed. They're going to want it fixed anyway. So at least the seller has been honest about it. Let me scooch back up here on 2 or 3 other things here. They go into quite a lot of detail. You see all these little boxes inside. Don't miss them. Okay, don't let your seller miss them. Obviously, these are the primary ones out here, but it's the same token. This is good information that the seller needs to pass on to the buyer if the seller knows it. And having said that, you've got a lot of investors selling right now too. And if the person literally does not know, it's okay for them to check no representation all the way down. Okay, there's no reason they can't do that. But if, like I said, if you get a property where an owner has rented the property for 8 years or 12 years or whatever, yeah, they should know, but they probably had a property manager taking care of it and they really don't know. In that scenario, they're going to say, well, I don't have to do a residential property disclosure. I've been renting it. No, that's not one of the exemptions. Remember the exemptions. So they do need to give you one, even though they put no representation all the way down. Okay. It's really important that you pay attention right now to the fuel source. In the listing agreement, we're getting ready to go through in a moment. And also in your new offer purchase, there's a major section on fuel source. Okay, the fuel source being if there's a outside tank, if there's oil or gas or whatever, make sure that you do pay attention to that. And you know, we're constantly having issues with septic systems and sewer systems, well and water. If you've gone through many of the forms, you've already seen our in-house form that we require on our listings and on our sales. It's called a septic or sewer and water disclosure verification. And we'll take a look at that in a moment, but you really do need to pay attention to that. It's hardly a week goes by that there's not a question or an issue, but thank goodness no more lawsuits right now, because you guys are doing a really good job on getting that form filled out for me, but mostly to get the information. All right. So you have down here is where you have some information about the septic and the septic or sewer and the well or city water. Present infestation of any kind of bugs. Primarily, obviously, you're looking for the termites is the main one, but make sure if for whatever reason they've had any issues with it or need a damage from it, they need to fix it first of all, or at least disclose it. Okay. Drainage. There's hardly a property right now that we're not, with all the rain that we've been having the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's amazing how many issues are coming into crawl spaces. And some of it really is just from drainage. It might not be from something that totally needs to be taken care of in that crawl space, but we are seeing a lot of water standing and needing humidifiers and sometimes even more serious remedies. Right here on let's see, where is it about is it right here? Permits. Okay, number 24. Is the property to be abated in violation of any local zoning ordinances, restrictive covenants, or other land use restrictions or building codes? And look here, including the failure to obtain proper permits for room additions or other changes, improvements. Don't let them slip over that. When you're walking through a house with that seller, they are so proud to tell you about that new deck, or they're so proud to tell you about that new sunroom. Oh, just look what we just added. They just know it's going to add so much value to their house. And you're saying, did you get a permit in your mind? And then it comes out your mind, well, you did get a permit, right? Don't accuse them, but your mind it should automatically go, they've got something new. So I need to find out who built it. Did they get a permit? Those are your 2 questions when they're so proud to show you their room addition, because it's going to have to come on this residential property disclosure first of all, and second of all, you're going to need to find out from the building permit that the permit was closed. Building permits are of no value to open. The value is when they have been closed, which means the inspector has gone out, approved of the work that was done, and close the permit. Okay, so I guess it was about 20 some years ago now, my very first E&O case had to do with permits that had not been closed, and the buyer's father was a builder and knew that they had to be closed. Do you know how few people really understand the value of having it closed? Well, all of you all do, because I tell you. But nevertheless, make sure that if there are building permits, make them available. You can pull them off the line on most counties, but make sure that it says closed on it. All right. Again, you might want to Look down here on the toxic substance or materials. Radon right now, we never used to test for radon. Radon wasn't even on the radar. We never even thought about radon. And in the last, gosh, I guess 5 or 6 years, it has become as much a part of the home inspection as any other part of the general home inspection. We're seeing a lot more tests being done for radon. We have some good resources that you could pass on. And again, that's one of those folders. I think I put one in this packet if you want me to email it out to you, that you need to give this to the seller, because it could very likely be that a buyer is going to have that radon test done, and the seller needs to know what it is. They need to know what's going to be done to the house. So you might want to make sure that they are aware of the benefits. Another one of those gases that you can't smell but kills you. Okay, so radon is one of the things to make people aware of, and we do have some good materials to pass on. The other thing obviously is lead-based paint. You know that if the home was built before 1978, remember that for pre-licensing, Robin even remembers. But you have to provide a lead-based paint disclosure. I just keep them in. I try to keep my little folder with my lead-based paint for disclosure in there. If I don't need it, I can discard it. Better than me having to hunt for it when I do need it. Okay, so I generally keep my lead-based paint disclosure in this pre-listing pack, and the EPA brochure. Actually I put one in this stack here. You can get those online. You can order them. I'll go down to the realtor store and pick up the actual brochure, which I really kind of like. If I'm going to hand a folder to somebody, I really like to have the brochures. But most of us are doing things on with emails and our forms programs, aren't we? So we do have it available in that format as well. Right here, this is kind of an important one, number 28. And a lot of times the sellers are not aware, but there may be lawsuits, particularly the ones we're seeing most are with the condominiums, townhome condominiums, where there's some lawsuits against builders or maybe roofing contractors, or most of the time it's a lawsuit that the HOA is filing themselves. They're not being filed against. But if you know of one, you do need to discover it and disclose it. Now, I got to tell you, sellers are famous for throwing anything the HOA sends. They just always just something, some other notice, I'll just throw it away, or I'll file it away, and they don't really pay any attention to it. So sometimes, even though the HOA makes the sellers aware, the sellers are not aware because they don't open their mail from the HOA. So you might want to pull their attention to that one in particular. On all this list, the one thing that you might want to notice that would definitely be a yes when you're checking this out. It's not a problem. It's just that there is a party wall in condominiums or some of those pinwheel design units. If there is a party wall, you need to make sure that you have them check yes in that particular place. Down here, the other thing to look for, you want to look for if there's a private road, there must be a private road agreement, what's called a private road maintenance agreement, because it's not being maintained by the city or the county. A lot of times it's maintained, if there's an HOA, it might be maintained by the HOA. And if there is, then you would have information from the HOA that would state that they take care of it. Like a parking lot or coming into the parking lot, you would have that in the HOA documents. But if you're on like a lot of times there's a gravel road and there may be 3 or 4 houses built on that gravel road, and they were family members at one time, but now one of the family members, maybe they're deceased, maybe they just chose to sell it, and now you've got an outsider. And what happens is you can't close on a loan on that gravel road without a private maintenance agreement. And so you might have your hands full if you get one of those folks that will say, we've always taken care of it. We're not going to stop taking care of it. That don't work. Verbal don't work. You know, so you're going to have a private road maintenance agreement, and you'll probably need to get the attorney to draft it up. And I've had agents have to go door to door to get signatories on that private road maintenance agreement so that you can get that property sold if you're a buyer's agent. And as a listing agent, I'd say do it right now. You know, don't wait till things goes under contract. Go ahead and get that private road maintenance agreement. Yes, you can have the seller to do it because the seller should be doing it. But you and I both know the sellers kind of like for us to do the things they hire us, or they think they hire us for everything. So make sure that you make them aware of it. And if need be, you can get them in touch with an attorney. Then the rest of this page has to do with the HOA. You'll notice there's 2 spots here for HOA. There are a number of communities that have 2 HOAs, particularly if they're in a mixed use development. You might have a master HOA agreement, and then you'll have a condo HOA agreement. So you need to provide the information for both HOAs, and many times the seller is not even aware that well, I shouldn't say many times. We found it the case that the seller wasn't aware that he was actually paying all that much on a secondary HOA, because he probably pays the primary HOA either monthly or quarterly, and then once a year you might have that other HOA. So just make them aware that they might have 2, and if they do, to please let you know what they are. One of the girls told me just this morning that one of the developments she was trying to get some covenants and restrictions from was going to charge considerable amount of money because they would not supply the covenants and restrictions from the HOA, and they were making buyers go through HomeWise, which is a paid service to get information. The sellers can go online and get them. They're free. They're right there for the seller. The seller obviously has access because they pay their dues. So that get your seller to get you the copy of the CCRs, any deed restrictions, any information that you can put in print, that's in print that you can supply, and don't make someone have to pay $200 or $235 to get this information. All right. And in light of that same conversation, if you are listing a home in a 55+ community like Sun City or Four Seasons, I know there's a number of others right now, every listing has to have that 55+ addendum. I don't know why they want it with every single listing. Everybody knows Sun City is a 55+ and Four Seasons plus, but they will not take a blanket agreement. Every listing, if you have it in a 55+, you must have the addendum from MLS for the 55+ community, and or you cannot say it in your listing that it is a 55+ community. And obviously you want to advertise that. So as you're doing your listing, make sure that you have that document from MLS. I don't think we have that in the overall performance programs, but it is in the MLS, the canopy envelope there in DocuSign. Okay, now let's go down to the next page. I'm spending a lot of time on this because I tell you that right now, after listening to that Gen Up class and having so much on the material facts, I want you all to really hone in on some of these things with the seller so that you don't get more problems. Okay, come on down here. For some reason, it's not wanting to move for me. Just do it this way then. All right, this section, this page obviously has to do with the HOA and the services that the seller is attesting that the HOA covers. Then you would need to verify that obviously with the HOA, and hopefully those documents that I suggested the seller get from from the HOA. Now, that's all the residential property disclosure, but let's look at this form. As you will notice, this form does not have the seal of the North Carolina. It is a form that is produced or released by the North Carolina Realtors Association, who do all the forms other than those that are coming from the commission, coming from the state. Remember, I told you there's 4 exemptions: the foreclosure, the estate, the new construction, and the family member that lives in the home. What would you do with a community or where our house property get listed if they're exempt from the residential property disclosure, but they have an HOA? See, every now and then you get those. The house itself might be in foreclosure, but the community's not, and so you are required to give some information about the HOA. If you have an exemption on the HOA, on the residential property disclosure, and you still need to disclose the HOA, this is the form you would use. Obviously, the little notes right here, what I just said. That form, it is in your main library of forms. It's form 2A12-T. 2A12-T. That basically is just information about the HOA. All right. So if you have them in the exempt category, please fill this out. And it's almost exactly what's in the residential property disclosure. But anyway, that's just a separate form. Not going to go through it because we've kind of touched on it already. Now, this is the other form that's required by the lawmakers of North Carolina. And some of you have heard me say before, in my 30, almost 40 years of real estate, I've never seen that word mandatory in a form. Obviously, we know some of them are mandatory, but they were very serious about this. So they put the word mandatory in the title of the form. So obviously it is required, except foreclosure, estate, or someone who's already living in the home. All right, those are your 3 exemptions. When you fill this out, you see this little pattern over here. These first 3 questions have to do with mineral rights. The set of 3 questions have to do with oil and gas rights. It started out a form primarily for mineral rights. It had to do with a lawsuit against fracking being done in a neighborhood, I believe it was in Cary, somewhere over in the eastern part of the state. And one of our national builders had sold off some fracking rights, mineral rights. And although the fracking is done about a mile below the house, our North Carolina government says that we have a right to the air above us and the ground below us, all the way to China, wherever. And they wanted owners to know, if they buy a land that has a house on it, there's a residence on it, then they need to know that there is some stuff going on underneath their house, or there's not. So most of this pattern you will see is no representation, because they may not know if any has been sold before they own it. Then you're going to see no and no most of the time, because they would know if they have severed the rights, if they've sold them off, or they know if they're going to sell it off. And again, most of the time this is no, because they're not. Same pattern here. Often you see no representation, and then you see no and no. No representation does not take in the other 2 questions. Sometimes I will see them, they'll come in and they'll just say no representation, no representation. That's not good enough. All right. It's got to be no representation and yes or no, yes or no. No representation, yes or no, yes or no. All right. One of the things you'll see in our area, you know, we've had some gold in them their hills. We have gold mines around here, and down in Wilmore, you might have some properties that would have the mineral oil, the mineral rights having been sold off. I've only seen about 3 of those, but I think it's rather interesting. And over in the Stallings and Indian Trail area, we saw one over in that area. So you won't see many, but every now and then you might find it on a property that's older. And like I said, the oil and the gas rights and the fracking is what's caused all this problem in the first place. So you do need to know that. No more. Again, if y'all have any questions that I might can answer, please don't hesitate to stop me talking and jump in. That's what I'm here for. This obviously looks very much like what the residential property disclosure looks like, right? The address and the owner's signature. And again, post that in the matrix if you can. Now look at this. Questions and answers and home inspections. Guess what? The form writers removed this checkbox from our agency agreements. Don't know why. If those of you who've been doing transactions for a year or so, for how many years, there were 3 boxes that you had to check. The seller or the buyer would check in their agency agreement that they'd gotten a sample of an offer to purchase, a sample of the professional services disclosure, and the Q&A on home inspections. They took away the home inspections. I don't know why. So, but at the same time, if I were you, I would kind of keep that handy. That's a really good little brochure. And we do have it in the format that you can email or send your form, send out, obviously, in your forms program. But I like the little brochure because it's colorful. Okay. Sometimes when you first give this all this paperwork to sellers, it's daunting. I mean, because it's looking like a lot of contracts and like I said, it can kind of be a little overwhelming. So just having a couple of little brochures in there can make it less daunting. The home inspection brochure you can print again out off the website. And you know, oddly enough, speaking of that, one of the things that they put in the offer to purchase this year is that they can go to the commission's website and order a brochure on this, or I think they can download it too. I don't know why they're pointing people to the website to do this, but that's what's they're recommending at this time. But I'm recommending that you don't have to check it off. You gave it to them, but if I was you, I'd be giving it to them. All right. All right, that's the brochure. There's your lead-based paint. If for whatever reason the seller may or may not know a thing about lead-based paint, but if the house was built before 1978, he must or she must give this disclosure. On this disclosure right here is where if they don't have any knowledge or any reports, and that's what we see most. Basically, the seller's initials here, and they note if they have any reports or don't have any reports, it will become in this section. This is the section for the buyers. Don't put anything in here. You as a listing agent advise them to fill in this to the best of their knowledge. Then they would go over on page 2, and you have a responsibility. Looky here. You have a responsibility to get that EPA pamphlet in their hands so that they understand the reason for disclosing anything about lead-based paint. And I'll show you, I have one of those in there too. I'll show it to you in a minute, but this is your initials as a listing agent. All right. This is one of the only forms that you will see that's between a buyer and a seller. However, look here, agents have to sign this too. The listing agent, that would be your signature. And then when the listing agent, when the buyer's agent gets the contract, they are also to sign this. Again, it's almost like that word mandatory. They're serious about this lead-based paint disclosure. All right. Another thing about the lead-based paint disclosure, if they anticipate that there may be some lead, and you hear a buyer or a buyer's agent say they're going to remodel, make sure there is another pamphlet from EPA for remodeling. And there are people, contractors who have certifications to be able to handle lead-based paint. So you want to advise that anybody who is anticipating remodeling would have that information and know to question a contractor and for the their certification on dealing with lead-based paint. Okay. Now the next thing, this is the brochure. Oh, come on. This is the little brochure. Protect your family from lead in your home. It's produced obviously from the EPA, and they're available in a lot of sources, but make sure that you have them. And if you have them in this format, you can obviously send them out. This is going to be many, many pages. So I'm going to scooch way on down. I'm not going to go through that, but just so that you know about it. Now here's the brochure, a brochure on radon. This is the South Carolina brochure, but I kind of liked it, so I'm going to give it to you. North Carolina has one. I didn't think it was quite as informative, but it's really good too. But I kind of like this one, so I put it in our packet of materials. Again, explaining why radon it's important. Another form, this is an in-house form, security disclosures. Just went through this week or so ago. Security systems are pretty well built into homes nowadays. You know, they used to have to lease the system. So most of the time now, unless it's an older home, you're not going to lease the system, but the seller is paying for a service if he has the security system activated. So the issue is not so much the fixture of the system, it's the service contract. The seller would be required to pay off that service contract unless the buyer is willing to assume that contract. Security system companies will charge, they have a transfer fee. So you need to find out what that transfer fee is. You also need to find out, first of all, is there a transfer fee? Can it be transferred? In other words, do your due diligence on the security. This is not, it's not something that you're involved in on this service contract. That's a third party. However, it becomes your problem if the seller gets to the closing table and there's this charge for them to pay it off, that then it become your problem. So just, if you know right up front it has a security system, make sure to get the information about it. And this is just a little worksheet, okay, just to remind you what to do. You don't have to get the other parties to sign it. The by and large, if you're a buyer's agent, you want to use something like this. If you're the listing agent, this is to make the seller aware of what needs to be done. The security codes and whatever, obviously, when are they going to be changed? It can get a little tedious right there at the end as you're getting for closing. So hit it right up front, you know, so that you are aware of what has to be done to that system. Sometimes a seller will be taking their contract with them to a new house, which is fine too. Well, if they're going to take you to a new house, your buyer needs to know that they're going to have to get their own security system service, right? Contract. The thing that you also want to be aware of is there are accessories to the security system that may be built in. The accessories are not. They're not fixtures, all right? The system would be a fixture. The accessories would not. I think one of the sweetest calls I got not too long ago was from this little older man, and he said, "Ma'am, I don't know what happened, but he said, I just bought this house and my door's not talking to me anymore." It was so sweet. Obviously, that's an accessory service to his security system. So his door will talk to him. He had to call the security system. Obviously, it wasn't our problem, but it was awfully sweet the way he asked about it. So make sure that their seller is aware of accessories that will not be staying with the house. Okay. This is a utilities list. This is a simple little list. There are several utilities lists out there. Why don't you get your seller just right up front, get your seller to get some information for the buyer. First of all, also it helps you. Looky here, a lot of sellers don't, a lot of buyers don't understand that trash service isn't included in every sale of the house. You know, there are people who move here from another area of the country, and that's part of their taxes. It's part of our taxes in some of our areas, but not every area. And if they're going to have to pay a tax for trash, maybe I think when I moved here it was like $67, whatever it was, you know, that can make a difference to some people. It makes a difference to all of us. But again, if they have again, this fuel oil thing, remember I told you we're going to get that in a minute in the listing agreement. Make sure they give the information on that, and it'll help you in the long run. Then you can pass it on to the buyer's agent. Okay. Again, this is just something pre-listing. Remember, you want them to fill in. So now those are the documents, as far as forms and documents I would put in the seller's hands before I sat down to go through with my listing agreement with them. Now let's go on over to the listing package itself now. And obviously the first thing you have to do is talk to them.
Miss Sabre, I hate to cut you off, but I just need a little clarity on the exemptions. I think I wrote it down for both of them, but you saying there are different exemptions for the mineral and oil rights? There
are 3 of the 4. So there's 4 for the residential property disclosure. It's foreclosure, estate, new construction, and family member or someone living in the home with them. The only difference in the mineral, oil, and gas, new construction is not exempt. New construction is required to have the mineral oil and gas. So there's actually only 3 exemptions for mineral oil.
Okay, so the 4 exemptions for the property disclosure is, you said foreclosure, new construction, family member, and what was the 4th one? I have
estate. Estate. No, estate. FSBO is not exempt. Sometimes they think they are, but they're not.
Okay, I thought that's what you said. Okay, so estate.
Yeah.
Okay, let me call. All right.
I'm glad you asked me that.
How about that? Thank you.
Sure, honey. Thanks for clarifying that. Really, really good. Now, they're working with real estate disclosure. I have finally learned to say disclosure. For 30 years, I've been saying working with real estate agents brochure, and it took me a year to start saying disclosures in a brochure. There is a brochure still available, but it's in the form of a questions and answers brochure now, because they've just given us this 1-page document. The working with real estate agents disclosure, one side of the document, the page, is for sellers. The other side is for buyers. But obviously in our e-signature programs that we use, it's 2 pages. Somebody was reminding us the other day, I forgot, maybe it was in my Gen Up class. This disclosure is disclosing to a buyer and or a seller what you and your company do as an agent. This is not for them to want you to do. It's not for them to make a choice of what you're going to do. This is strictly your disclosure that in our firm, we work as a single agent representing the seller, or we can work as a dual agent representing the buyer and the seller. And we also work as a designated agent. Normally, I'm so sorry, throat's dry today. As a designated agent, you can be designated to represent only the seller, and we will designate some other agent to represent the buyer. So every now and then you'll hear a seller say, well, I thought I was hiring you to represent me. I don't want you to represent the buyer and me. And that's when you go into your discussion about the designated agency. So we'll talk a little bit more about agency in our listing agreement, but you want to keep it pretty brief here. I had some of the new agents say, well, can I just read it? I said, sure, you can. If you need to just read it, that's fine too. But you want to keep it brief, but help them to know you can represent them solely as the seller. The firm and you as an individual agent could represent the buyer and the seller. And if they want exclusive representation by you, then we would offer them designated agency. And that's all you want to disclose to them at this particular time. Now, down on this last little section here, if you are not sure that seller is going to list with you, you want to make sure that he understands if he is going to try to sell it by himself, he probably needs to be aware that he shouldn't be telling buyers and buyer's agency anything that would be detrimental to his negotiating power, because nobody's representing him in that scenario. So again, that statement is enough for you to disclose this little section right here. You get the seller signature that you gave him this disclosure. Then you put your name on here, the agent's license number, and the firm name. Now, you're not going to have a listing agreement or a buyer's agency agreement with everybody you talk to. These disclosures that we call WREA, they're working with real estate agents disclosures, we're supposed to present that to everybody that we talk to. At first substantial contact is the wording used, but basically when you start talking to somebody about their motivation to buy or their motivation to sell, their ability to buy, their plans to move, where they're moving after they sell this house, motivation, anything that be that you need to keep confidential and to be loyal to that client. You need to stop them right then and talk to them about their work with the real estate agents. Okay. And like sometimes when I'm in an open house or something and they start talking, I just put my hand up and say, wait, I can't hear that yet, and so they stop the conversation, and then you can go into your spiel of why that the law requires you to explain to them how we as real estate agents work. Okay. So now hopefully you get past that stage, and you're going to keep a file or a folder on your computer. You can even set up one in Command if you want to, where you're going to put those a stack of working with real estate agents, because again, not all of us get every agency agreement we go after, but we do have the responsibility to keep those working with real estate agents disclosures signed by the people we talk to. And if the real estate commission were to come in and ask to see these forms, I might have to come to you and say, okay, where are they? Okay, so make sure you keep them on record somewhere where we could get to them. Now let's go down to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. I pulled this one, and let me show you. This is the 103. I'm going to kind of breeze through it because we normally go the 101, which is the residential property with the house on it. This is one of the vacant lots where we sell land. There are two listing agreements in North Carolina. As I just explained, one has a house on it, the other is just vacant land. So I kind of thought we might kind of wander through this one today just for something new, because some of you have been with me before on this call, and I wanted you to notice that there are some differences in the form, not many, but one of the major differences right now is this note right on the top here. And by the way, let me show you this. You see where it says consult guidelines, Form 103G? You can get guidelines from the commission from all of these forms if you want something in writing. I appreciate you coming to my forms classes, but if you want something in writing that maybe I haven't supplied to you, you can also get those guides if you want to do that. Now, in this little paragraph, this paragraph has a lot of stuff in it. Most of you, if you're going to sell land, a lot, it'll probably be sold in a lot in a neighborhood maybe, or you may be selling an acre or 3 acres or 5 acres, which is fine because somebody's going to build a house on it. Basically, this is saying you don't want to use this if it's going to be a developer who's going to buy a major piece of land, like Mr. Vincent has a new listing down in South Carolina for, I think it's, oh, Vincent, where'd you go? That nice little listing down there for a lot of acreage. You would not, in North Carolina, you would not want to use this as a listing agreement. You would have to get that drafted by an attorney if it's going to be developed into a, plats or whatever. So that's what that little note is about right here. Now, in the exclusive right to sell, you're going to obviously have as the seller's name here, and then right here, notice this is the listing firm. All right, that would be Keller Williams Ballantyne area. It is not Keller Williams Robin Palmer. You don't have to put your name. All right, you represent us when you sign the agreement, but this is the firm name because obviously listings are held by the firm, Keller Williams Ballantyne area. Now you want to come back in here and let's look at this. Lousy mercy, this has got more stuff in it than this one was. At the wee hours of the night last night, one of my little angels decides to text me, and I didn't respond, but it did wake me up. She was in a panic about an LLC, and supposedly somebody was pushing her to get an answer last night, and I'm thinking, in the middle of the night? But anyway, I think she just couldn't sleep and she didn't realize the text would wake me up. But we did talk this morning. When you have a buyer who is buying a property in the name of an LLC or a corporation, then you must find out, first of all, is that person the authorized person to sign a listing agreement? And the way you often find that out is to go to the Secretary of State website in the state where the property is located. And if you're selling it in North Carolina, it most likely is going to be an LLC or corporation, and that the Secretary of State of North Carolina would have registered. Okay, so you go to the website sosnc.gov, and you look up the business name, and you have to, I believe you have to go into the annual report to see if who has the authority to sign on behalf of that LLC or corporation. But just look for the term manager is most often used if there's more than one person in the LLC. And obviously if it's a corporation, you're probably going to have a president who's the authorized, or some corporations would designate maybe a treasurer, but just make sure that you see who has the authority to sign for them. It's not a bad idea to have a copy of that on hand. If you don't, the attorney is going to ask them for it when they do close. So you might as well make them aware right up front that this is going to be needed if they're going to be selling. So the LLC, you want to check that out. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes how you're going to sign for that, how they'll sign. If it's an LLC, it would be, let's say 123 Main LLC here. And here's Keller Williams Ballantyne again. Then when they sign this listing agreement on the last, well, I might as well just show you while I'm here. Okay, we want to go all the way to the back where they're signing. And right here, see where it says entity seller? They don't sign as a seller because it's an entity. It's not the individual. It's an entity seller. And here's where the signature of the individual goes. This is 123 Main LLC by Charles Moore. And this is Charles Moore's signature right here, right in this area. That's where you're going to print his name, you know, or type it in. Then you're going to see this says title. That's what I was talking about a moment ago. A manager of an LLC or a member organizer. Those are another term. Most of the time it's manager right here, or the corporate, like I said a while ago, the president. Then you want to put that person's information here and a mailing address. Then down here, again, here's the Keller Williams Valentine, the firm name. Our firm number, if you want to write it down, if you don't have it, is capital C 13291. 13291. That is our firm number with North Carolina. The firm number you would put here, and right here is where your signature goes. And you want to always put your individual license number. Here's the firm number, and then here's your North Carolina license number. And again, this would be your information here, your email and your agent number. So all this to say, if it's an entity, and now I'm going to go back to page 1 in a minute, and I'm going to show you some other entities. It could be a trust. It could be an estate. An estate is an entity. So it's not only an LLC or corporation. It could be those other two possibilities. Okay. And if they are, like I said, we're seeing a lot of what they call living trusts right now, where people who are still alive have a family trust that when they do die, then the will does not have to go through probate. It's handled through a trust. So if that's a trust name, you're going to put the full name, and it would be the full name, let's say by Charles Moore, I'm using that same name. And it might be the Charles Moore and Dorothy Moore living trust or family trust. And then it would be by Charles Moore trustee, or if both of them are trustees, it could be that. And then they sign, or one of them would sign right in here, who has the right to sign. And then again, you write it out that way. Now that's not going to be easy to set up in your forms program, because in the forms programs, you have to make sure that you get the seller in the right spot, which would be signing here, not here. Okay. And you might have to type in the entity name here, because there's a automatic process in there where they would transfer the name of the seller into here. Okay, let's go back to page 1 now. And that paragraph that we were just looking at, we talked about the limited, the LLC and the corporation and the trust. This one up here, someone just passed away. This is the estate. That can get complicated. I tell you, I just went through one of those in my family, and depends on how the will is written. So if you're going to list a property, you've got to know how the will is written. Sometimes the will is written in such that the executor or executrix has not only the right, but has the direction that they are the ones that are to sell the property. It would be for the executor, like I said, executrix, to sell it. More times than not, it's going to be that the property is going to go to the heirs, and all the heirs and their spouses in North Carolina have to sign the listing agreement, as well as any other documents. All right. So if it's an estate that, let's say there was 4 heirs and 3 of them were married, you would have 7 signatories that would have to go on this listing agreement, right? There's only places for 2 people to sign. So what you gonna do? there's a form. Guess what? Thank goodness North Carolina did one of these. South Carolina didn't, but North Carolina, it's called Additional Signatories Addendum. You know, that one you can figure out easily. So if there's more than two to sign, you want to use the form called Additional Signatories Addendum. And on that, you can take up, I think there's maybe spots for 7 or 8 people to sign. And if you need another page, you do the other side. I think the most we've got, it seems to me like there was one years ago on some land that was like 31 or 32 people had to sign. And I thought that poor little agent was never going to get all those signatures. But, and at that time, we didn't have additional signatures addendum, quite honestly. But on that additional signatures form, you can list on the top of the form, there's a blank that you can list the other forms that would addend, you know, like the exclusive right to sell, the working with real estate agents, brochure, disclosure, or let's say maybe you might even want to put the offer to purchase on there. I would recommend you not. I think I would go back to them again with my offer to purchase, and then get a second addendum with the additional signatures. So if you have an estate, give me a call and we'll talk a little bit more further about it. But you can see it can kind of get complicated. Sometimes they'll put as the seller, it would be the estate of what I say. Let's say John Moore. Okay, the estate of John Moore by Charles Moore, executor, because he has the right to sell it. If he doesn't have the right to sell it and he has to have the heirs, it has to be by, you have to list all the names of the people that are part of that estate on as a seller. So like I said, it may be better for you to give me a call on the specific situation, but just know the estates are not easy to fill in that seller blank. Now, this section down here, non-owner spouse, every now and then you might have a situation where there was a divorce and the one party has remarried. So you've got, let's say a husband divorced one wife and married another wife. So you've got the husband and the new wife because of marital rights, and you have the previous wife that hasn't been severed for whatever reason. Maybe the divorce attorney didn't get it taken care of during the divorce, or maybe they didn't get the settlements signed, you know, to resolve it. So it can be a really hairy situation too. So, but just make sure that because of these marital rights in North Carolina, it is not the same way in South Carolina. In North Carolina, we have the rights of survivorship that is the default on our contract. So be aware of that if somebody needs to sign, and watch out for prenuptial agreements. Every now and then you'll get those. There is a form called a free trader agreement. A free trader agreement is that during the process of a divorce, one or the other party can sign this free trader agreement, giving up their rights to the house. It's kind of like a quick claim deed. They can give up their rights, and if they do, then just the individual person has the right to sell the property. So so just be aware of these terms, that if you find out they are in a divorce situation, be aware of the terms, because you may need to ask about them. Okay. Now down to the agreement itself. You see right here in bold print, did you discuss with them the work of real estate agents? Of course you did. Okay. The term of the agreement. Term of agreement, there's no agreement if you don't have a beginning and an end. All right. So the beginning of the term of the agreement typically is the date that it's signed by the seller. So if you got something signed on the 22nd, then that becomes the beginning date. Now right here, I'm not going to go into this, but I don't want you ever to check that right there. Okay, just let's begin at the effective date that you signed it. The expiration date. Listings are getting longer. You know, right now we were not seeing listings last for about 24 hours on the market, but now they're lasting several days. I'm beginning to see price adjustments, which means they've been on the market a few days, not a few months. So there is a little slowing, but there's still lots of business going on, but there's a little slowing. So I would go ahead and in this little blank here, make sure you put at least maybe 4 months, 4 to 6 months on it. And hopefully it doesn't last that long. Obviously, you're going to get the information here. Normally, you're going to get that off the tax records. If you are looking at a previous listing, please don't copy the listing, please. You don't know if that person knows what they're doing. You don't know if they did it right. You know, do your own work, okay? At least you can depend on yourself to find the answers. So you want any information you have, whether the seller gives it to you or whether you saw it on a previous MLS listing, you want to go to the tax records and verify. Every now and then, you'll find a discrepancy. And if you do, then we need to know how to correct it. Correct it when you find it, not at the closing, all right? So get your tax records out and compare what the seller has told you the address is. And every now and then the address is going to be a little different because of postal, most of the time it's because of the post office, because they'll give a different address, you know, because of mail delivery. So, but if you find a discrepancy, you can give me a call or give the tax record, tax department a call. In North Carolina, we don't deal with plats. That's just, I shouldn't say North Carolina, in our area of North Carolina, we don't use plat references or plat books or slides. There are other parts of North Carolina where they are used. We use the legal description and a deed booking page. So when you see this right here, the plat reference, you can put the lot number because it's obviously L13, you know, that's 13, but don't try to figure out the rest of this, okay? Because again, we don't do plats. The subdivision and condominium, yes, it should be in the tax records. If the seller hasn't told you, or if you don't know what the subdivision is, it should be on the tax records. And let me tell you something about condominiums. You can tell by the legal description if the property is a condominium and not a townhome. It may look like a townhome, but it may be deeded as a condominium. And you want to look for the word unit, U-N-I-T, unit. If in the legal description there is the word unit, you know that the buyer is not going to be buying any land and the seller has no land to sell because his unit is part of a condominium complex. All the land is owned by the HOA. Whereas with a townhome, a true townhome that's deeded that way, there may be a little bit of land, but there's land. So it's going to have a legal description that would not have the word unit. All right. Now, your legal description that starts with L, right here, where it says other description, I want you to write out that legal description. This is the only line long enough to write some of the legal descriptions on. So if you will write out the full legal description right here, that would be very helpful to the attorney. Now, this line right here where it says PIN, PID, right in here, that's your property ID. When you look in MLS, up in the top right-hand side, you can see a blue underline of several numbers, which is indicative of it being a hyperlink to those numbers. And that's your property ID. That's where you're going to put it, your property ID, where so anybody looking at MLS can go directly to that property. They don't have to go into Realist and find the property. That's a hyperlink that's automatically set up once you put in those numbers. So make sure that you have the property ID number and you'll put it right here. Again, we do not put anything in plat book, slide, or at page because we don't use them. But you do want to have a deed book and page. Okay, that will be on your tax record. The most recent deed book and page you want to put in here, because then you're going to have to enter it in MLS when you put the listing in matrix. The listing price, obviously you're going to have to do a CMA, and once you do your CMA, pricing is really difficult right now because things are exorbitantly priced. We're seeing a little adjustment on those price, but sellers are pretty adamant that they want things overpriced going into the listing, and that's not going to be easy for you because they're going to be disappointed if they think they're going to get the price they could have gotten even 2 months ago or a month ago. Okay. Just because the market is softening a little bit. But I did hear that that we might get a little breath of fresh air on those interest rates. So maybe we'll see a hot September. The listing price, obviously you were going to enter it here after you've gone through explanation on your CMA to the seller. On the listing agreement, you can choose several options of finance. On the offer to purchase, you only choose one, but you want to check as many as the seller will accept. If the property is more than 409, I think it is now, there is a maximum amount on an FHA. There's maximum amounts on VA where they can get 100% financing. You might want to verify that with a loan officer right now because those things do change. I'm just amazed that it's over 400 with FHA. Again, that could change at any time. But if the property is valued at $550,000, you know you can't offer an FHA loan. So don't even put it in there. Okay, it's going to be cash or conventional because of the price of the property. If it's in an area where there are properties that can be sold USDA, that's another 100% type loan, but that's usually a more modest price home, and it is a location specific. So there's some criteria, and you can look that up online. You can go into USDA.gov and find, or talk to your loan officer and let them look it up for you to see if it can even be sold USDA. But that's a good selling point. So you want to find out if it can go USDA. There's rarely ever a loan inception anymore, and even as rare, it would be seller financing. So most of the time you're going to have cash and conventional, and you may possibly have the others. Those are the things you're going to enter into MLS. Now the firm's compensation, I want to point out right here, you see that's where it says total fee. For many years we have said we as a firm would expect 6% here as a total. That is not what's going on in the marketplace these days. I still want you to aim for it because obviously agents need to get paid. And remember, this is the total. And the reason I want to point this out to is every now and then an agent will put just the amount that they think they're getting as the listing agent. Say, let's just use the figures that we've used for so many years, 6%, and you're going to share it, 3%, 3%. Well, then if you put 3% here and you go down here, let's see a little bit further, see down here at the bottom, cooperation with other firms. And we're going to check this box right here that we cooperate with buyer's agents, but we're going to give 3% to the buyer's agent. If you put 3% up there, you've just given away your 3% down here. Don't do that. So you want a total up here, up in this blank. You want the, whoops, let me go further. You want the total there, and then you come down here and in whatever proportion you and the seller want to divide. I'm seeing all over the board. But it has to be agreed to by you and the seller. 6, 3, and 3 has worked really well for many years, but there's a lot of lawsuits going on right now with the Department of Justice and National Association of Realtors, and that's causing some problems for those of us who are looking at the buyer's agent compensation. So, but whatever you all do agree to, then it's in writing in this agency agreement. Let me show you right here. Only check this middle box. All right. We do not offer what's called sub-agency. You are the sub-agent as the listing agent. We do not offer the opportunity for someone from another firm to come in and be a sub-agent. You and the agents in Keller Williams are sub-agents. Down here, we are not cooperating through another firm's attached policy. No, we don't do that. So you're only going to check this middle box right here, okay? This blank up here is going to be typically 60 to 90 days. It doesn't matter. It's a protection period, and hopefully goodness you get a chance to use it. But I got to tell you, it's not worth the blank that it's written on because it doesn't hold up most of the time. So, but just be aware, it's kind of like helping people to understand they do have a loyalty to you a little bit after the listing expires, unless they list with somebody else. Okay, let's scooch on down here. The firm's duties, I'm not going to go into too much of those because I want you to read these. You know what, if you read these agency agreements once a month, boy, I tell you what, you all will be the best informed agents ever. But just read through them from time to time and on these different sections. You'd be surprised how much you can forget in a month's time. I like the way they've outlined. They changed the form a little bit this year, and I do think it's much more user friendly in reading. Obviously, we have efforts to find the buyer, but we're not responsible to bring the buyer. We disclosure material facts and material terms. Disclosure of those material facts we've already talked about. You're going to learn more about. But other services we might recommend somebody, but that doesn't mean that we have any liability from recommending them. And then obviously it says that we're going to provide all the information to the MLS. So that's what those things are. And again, I think they did a good job of simplifying it a little bit, not sounding so legalese. Okay. Now, one of the biggest things that they brought out in the last couple of years has been on the fair housing legislation, an act that we're obviously are abiding by. And you want to help your sellers to understand that we are not going to be party to love letters. Love letters are those letters that are to coerce the seller to identify with the buyer. They've worked really well for years, and we didn't know we were violating fair housing by saying that our children are going to love playing in that big backyard. But that is a violation of fair housing if we say anything about our children. So don't use that word. And there are obviously other things. One of the things we find out is they'll say that we're located near maybe the Jewish Community Center, and that's going to be so helpful to my family. You can't say that. So there's several different things that you might want to just be aware of to help the seller to understand we will not be delivering a letter to you, Mr. Seller. Now, if you get one somehow in the mail or you get one someplace else, that's up to that person, but we won't be delivering it to you. And after you explain that to them, then there's an initial right here that you did explain them. So I think the former writers were pretty serious about wanting us to explain to them, right? So that's where you get their initials. Now, this number 7, this is the one that's probably causes more challenge to anybody. Lousy mercy. When is the marketing date? What is the marketing date? Which marketing date? How is it defined in all these different places? I wish to goodness there were other words for marketing date, but for whatever reason, we haven't found other words. I'm going to say marketing date 1 and marketing date 2. The commencement of marketing is part of that clear cooperation policy. Back in 2020, in May, right in the middle of the height of COVID, all the challenge we had there, they introduced something called the clear cooperation policy. That policy says that within 24 hours of any public marketing, that listing has to be an MLS. Well, again, that has caused a lot of concern as we've tried to adhere to it, and then there's been some other definitions that have come out. Public marketing basically is any time that's going to be marketed to a person outside of your firm. Now, if you'll look here, let's kind of look at the diagram or the outline first, and then we'll come back into the sections. You have a date up here, commencement of marketing, called marketing date. All right. Then you come down here and you have public marketing and you have office exclusive marketing. These are the two. You have the overall marketing, and then you have two options underneath there. You have either public marketing or you have office exclusive. Our term with our MLS is called firm exclusive. All right. The firm exclusive is when nobody else can know about the property other than the agents within our firm. Our firm can do some marketing on our Facebook page, our internal Facebook page, the one that says official, can't go outside. We can send emails back and forth. We can talk to other agents in our firm about it. That's what they used to call a pocket listing. And then it became an in-house listing. And now it's called a firm exclusive. The people who wrote the clear cooperation policy considered this because there are people who need the privacy. They need or want the privacy of having their home sold without it being a public material. They don't want people. Can you imagine how many people want to go see Tom Brady's house if there was on the market that Tom Brady is, that's his house, or vice versa? I mean, he's just one name. I like football, so he comes to my mind. But there's we've had some stars. I remember one quite renowned musician that sold a property uptown Charlotte, and we obviously had to protect his privacy, give him the privacy. More often, that's the way it was designed. More often you might find that someone just is not ready to go on the market yet. Their house, they want to get the listing agreement, but they're not going to be ready for, let's say, 6 weeks. Well, if you want to put it under a firm exclusive agreement during that time, with the understanding with the seller that you're not even going to expose it to the people in the firm. You basically are, you're going to give them the time to get the house ready. That's what some of the agents are doing. Not many, but that is one way of doing it. The firm exclusive works really well in a situation where you do need longer than 21 days, because if you put it in MLS under coming soon, the maximum number of days is 21. And if that seller's not ready for 6 weeks, but he's ready to list, obviously the means to do that would be the firm exclusive agreement, and you would have initials right here. And that's the only paperwork you would do at that particular time. Then when the seller wants it to go into MLS, you would have to terminate this agreement, the firm exclusive. You would have to terminate it. And the way you terminate it is with a form called, it's number 710. It's right here. You would terminate it with 710. And I do have a sample of the wording that you might want to use on that. So if you want to ask me for that or whatever, I'll get that to you. You would want to terminate that firm exclusive. Then you could either go coming soon, or you can go active immediately, depending on what your seller is ready to do at that time. And that's what you're going to write on 710. Now, that's the exception. Let's go back to what normally happens. If you have a firm exclusive, this is the date that you're going to be that you can expose it to people in the firm. Again, if the seller doesn't want to expose at that time, then that would be part of the firm exclusive agreement. Now, most of the time, this would typically be 1 day after you sign the listing agreement. Nobody's ready to put a listing active in MLS in 1 day. I mean, 1 business day rather. You're just not ready. You need to get pictures done. You need to get measurements. I mean, you're going to get the residential property disclosure. Remember, we're going to get that. There's a lot of things you got to do to get ready. So that's where we want to use the coming soon time. So you're going to come down here. You're going to initial public marketing. And one of the public marketing means would be coming soon. The coming soon advertising is part of the public marketing according to this document. According to MLS, it's not public marketing because it's only going to members of MLS. So that's one of the things that causes a lot of concern, because you're saying, well, like I said, the state's saying one thing and the MLS is saying another, but the state said we go by what the MLS says. All right. So if you have initials here, again, for the seller understands you're going to use coming soon advertising. So this date right here is going to match the date on the coming soon addendum or form. There is a form with MLS called coming soon. And on that coming soon, there is a place for a date. That date should match this date right here. This date is going to be later than this date. This is the date you're going to put it in coming soon. If you're going to put it in coming soon, let's say August the 5th, you're going to have an coming soon agreement signed that says, then I'm going to leave it in coming soon for 3 weeks. Maybe most of the time we don't leave it in that long, but whatever date that would be 3 weeks from now, the maximum is 21 days. That date is going to match this one right here. If you're going to put it in active, make sure you put the date here. If you're not going to use coming soon, you're obviously not going to check this, and you will do these other things because you're not going to go in coming soon. If you're going to coming soon, remember you've got to use the coming soon rider on the sign. You can put a sign out. You can advertise it anywhere and everywhere as long as you say that it's coming soon. All right. So you can start your public advertising, but it has to have the words coming soon with it. And please don't advertise open house and have a coming soon rider on it. That's ambiguous. And so you don't want to do that. All right. If you're going to have an open house, wait till you at least wait till you take the coming soon off. That way you can recognize, because remember, the one thing that you have to be careful about on coming soon is you can't show it. That's the, and we shouldn't even call it coming soon. We should call it coming soon no show. So we keep reinforcing, because it'll cost you $1,000 if you let that house be shown during that coming soon no show status in MLS. Okay. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to get, and we've had 2 agents get dinged for that. So you don't want that. So make sure if you're going to go public advertising, and that public advertising is going to include coming soon, then it goes into MLS on that coming soon date up here. And this is the date it comes out of coming soon to be active. Confusing, isn't it? I have the hardest time keeping my mind wrapped around that. And then when I start doing it the way South Carolina does it, it confuses me even more. So I know it confuses you. But again, remember there's 2 options under the commencement of marketing. The commencement of marketing can either be within 1 business day, or it can be within the date that you put that it's going to come soon. And one thing you can, MLS did tell us, if you need to delay these a few days, don't delay it 2 months or a month even. But if you need to delay it like 4 or 5 days before you go into that, So you take your listing on, let's say, the August 1st. Normally it would go into MLS or coming soon, the second business day, August the 2nd. But if you want to make it go into coming soon on the 5th, that's reasonable. All right, that you just had a little breather here, but just make sure you're coming soon. It goes into coming soon, and then the marketing date is the same. Okay. Those two addendums. Oh, let me explain about the addendums. They're not, excuse me, it's not addendum, it's an agreement, the MLS agreement. So coming soon and or firm exclusive. I have to sign them. The member participant is the broker in charge. And on that form, there's a blank for the member participant to sign. The coming soon, we do not turn into MLS. The firm exclusive, I do have to turn it into MLS. I have to register that we have that. So make sure if you have a firm exclusive agreement signed by your sellers, put me on your envelope when you're sending it out through DocuSign or ever how you're going to send it out. Make sure that I'm on that same distribution list for signatories, and it has to be done within 2 business days. So when I get it, as soon as I get it and I sign it, I register it right then. But it's up to you to get it to me within 2 days. All right. And remember, the word is member participant. Those are, it just registers with them so that if somebody calls and complains about you having a listing out there, you have a right to. And don't put a sign in the yard. Okay. That's considered public marketing. So don't put a sign in the yard. You can put a lockbox only, but again, that would be just for the people in our office to be able to access it. So, and if you're going, there's not going to be any advertising that you can do of that listing outside of the market center. Just keep that in mind. All right. I know that's probably the most confusing thing of it all. This is where you get the authority from the seller to put your lockbox on there. And when please don't use the combo locks. Goodness, guys, combo locks are so unsafe. Make sure you use the super locks, even if you have to borrow them from somebody, okay? Because at least when somebody accesses that box, we can tell who went into that house. And occasionally we do have to track them down. Right here on the earnest money, you would put the firm does not maintain a trust account. We do not maintain a trust account any longer. We are now, all of our earnest money, we're directing sellers to take it to the closing attorney. So make sure that you check that we do not maintain one. The rest of these questions are questions that easily answered. The main thing that you would want to do is to sit with your seller. Like I said, it can take hours just to fill out the listing agreement, much less all those other documents, right? So you want to make sure that you get the answers to all these little boxes. And this bankruptcy, that's one of the most sensitive questions that I find that we answer or have to ask. But I usually explain it like, I have to tell you that if your house were to be in a bankruptcy court, the court would have to release your house from the bankruptcy protection in order for us to sign it. Otherwise, it's your private business, but it becomes my business if I can't sell it, and I've given you indication I can. So you need to talk to the bankruptcy attorney if you are in bankruptcy. You don't have to get you don't have to nail it down, but explain to them why you're asking it. Okay. And that is true. And it costs about a little under $500, $475, I think, to get it pulled out of bankruptcy, for the judge to release it. So, and you can't do a thing. You can't put the listing in, or you can't do anything about selling it until it is released, if it's been protected. Down here, oh, right here, looky here. Remember I told you a while ago the sample forms, they'd taken away the Q&A on home inspections. Now you only have the sample form of the contract, and you only have the sample form of the professional services disclosure. No Q&A on home inspections that I've suggested you give to it anyway. Okay, now this is where you're going to find out if there's if there are any liens of property. Is there a first mortgage? Not many of us own our homes cash, free and clear. So there's almost always a first mortgage. Every now and then you will find a seller who does not want to disclose that to you. And if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. He will have to before you close on the property. But this just kind of gives information to the attorney ahead of time. Let's see, scooch on down here a little bit. Come on down. Oh, if there are any leases, make sure if there is a lease, that lease is it's going to need to be made available for any buyer who would need to see it, whether if there's a lease on it. If it's land, it might be the land might be leased for FAA use, you know, or with the cable companies. So you make sure to ask, even if it's land, if there would be any lease on the property. And I hear this word here, special assessments. Remember I mentioned earlier on the special assessments that are now being lumped into material facts. Make sure that there's no special assessments, because the seller does have to pay that off at closing. He has to disclose if they're just talking about it. But if there is a special assessment, that is going to have to be paid by the seller at closing. And so he might want to include that in the price. Okay. Maybe this right here, photographs and other materials. Would you believe photographs are owned by the photographer? You said, well, I just paid $500 for them. Oh, well, you're the photographer owns supposedly or apparently they have copyright to their work. And so you might want to make sure that if you're paying $500 for the use of that property, that you read the print that you might be signing, and to find out if it's only for one use, yours on that particular listing, which most of the time it is. Just make sure that that you or the seller might not think that you could pass it on to somebody else. Sometimes the buyers will buy it and they say, well, I'm going to rent the house and I want to use these pictures when I get the house ready to rent. You can't just do that. You've got to get some permission from the photographer, because the photographer owns the rights, okay, unless your agreement that you signed allows you. Any additional terms? Additional terms typically are would be something like the agent is related to the seller. Because you have to, or you could say the agent is the seller, or seller is agent. That's where you're going to disclose it. There's no other place to disclose it on the North Carolina forms, but we are required to disclose it. So this is where you would disclose that. Then you have the whole section on dual agency. And we're not going to go into detail because we're out of time. But this and they've done a really nice job of reformatting the explanation of dual agency and of agency in general. Take time to read through that. I really think the form writers have done a nice job simplifying that as well. So you might want to read through that and see how they've done. The most important thing to remember is that if you're not in single agency, where you're just representing the seller and there's another buyer's agency, whatever, if you're not in that role, you most likely are going to be in a dual agency role. It's the firm that's the dual agent. The firm becomes a dual agent if there is anybody in our firm that is wanting to see the property, obviously writing off of the property. That is going to be, it's going to throw the firm into dual agent. It doesn't throw you as an individual in dual agency. Although if you bring the buyer to this listing, you are automatically into an individual dual agent. It's the firm first, and then you can be the individual. and that's okay. I don't advise it, but through the years we've done it, and it can be done as long as you can be very neutral. You have to be just like a carrier pigeon. You can take the information from one party to the other party's information back to the first party. If you can be that neutral in the scenario, you can put deals together. You can be the individual dual agent. But if you have the listing and we have an agent in Valentine who brings the buyer, then you are automatically, per the firm policy, in designated agency. You are designated to represent the seller. The buyer's agent, who already has a buyer's agency agreement, probably is designated now as the buyer's agent. So you are now in designated agency by firm policy, so that you can keep your information private and confidential to your seller, and the buyer's agent will have the same right with the buyer. And that seems, in my opinion, to work a lot better than you as an individual dual agent. But again, you legally can do either one. Now, what you want to do is, see, I told you they reformatted things. This is why you want to be real careful to spend some time looking at this, because but it's so much simpler now the way they've got it written. So hopefully you will not have as much problem of getting the right box initial. All right. The only way you can have designated agency is to have dual agency. You have to have dual first, and then it can be designated. And if you know too much about the other party in some way, you obviously can't be dual agent because you already know too much about that other party. So again, that would be a time that maybe you would call me and say, I know too much about one of these parties, so we're going to have to designate somebody in the firm. They may not have brought the buyer, but we're going to have to designate someone else to bring up to represent this buyer, because maybe I showed them property last week or something, you know. So that's another way of using designated. But anyway, it explains it pretty clearly right here underneath dual agency. Now down here, if they choose, they do not want anybody else in our firm representing them, nobody else, just you, then they are going to sign here. That eliminates about 500 agents out there in the marketplace. There'll be much to their benefit to have them be able to come and show that property and sell it. And it doesn't mean that that agent can't call you and say, would your seller reconsider? I've got an interested buyer. But right now, going into it, when you're filling this out, you don't know that. So if they say, I do not want dual agency in the firm, then they would initial right here. This paragraph has been also developed a little fuller as to what would be a termination or what would be a breach of contract. So obviously these are the ways that we would terminate a contract. And don't forget to talk about the wire fraud. Oh my gosh, it is still so scary when you what's scaring me right now is a lot of people doing earnest money with wires, and they're doing DDF with wires because the DDF is so high. That's scary because there's so many wire fraud scenarios even still happening according to the FBI. So make sure your clients understand that they have to verbally talk to someone they know in order to get the instructions or to verify wiring instructions. And we talked about the signature page, so I'm not going to talk about that. Let me just, if you'll give me about 5 more minutes, because I know it took us a little while to get into this today. I wanted to point out to you the professional services disclosure. You said, well, the sellers don't do anything. No, you don't need it for the sellers as far as them agreeing to sign anything. You're educating them again. The buyers are going to have inspections, and this is a list of the majority of the ones they might choose to have. such as, remember the radon I talked about a while ago? That's on here. By and large, it's rarely ever that a buyer's agent doesn't recommend, or a buyer doesn't have a general home inspection. Obviously, it's a pool or spa, they're going to have it. The wood infestation, the termite, obviously these are some of the basic ones. Obviously, they very well, the seller may be well aware of, but they might not be aware of the radon maybe. So you might want to make sure and point this out to them right here on the flood, on the insurance. Find out if they have flood insurance on their property. If they do, they pay it once a year. That's not paid on a monthly basis or quarterly. It's a once a year thing, and it's through FEMA. It's a government program. So you want to find out if they have it. All right. If they don't have it and the lender comes back to the buyer and says, you're going to have flood insurance. The seller says, well, I don't have flood insurance. The way you're going to resolve that is to have the surveyor come and do an elevation certificate. The surveyor is the only one who can to break that dispute as to do they have it or don't they have it. And with that elevation certificate, then that is presented back to the lender, and hopefully it doesn't cause the sale to fall through. Oh, that's what they just right here, where it says elevation certificate. That's done by a surveyor. Obviously, the mortgage loan the mortgage is gotten by the buyer, so you probably not going to have anything to do with that. Now, what I would suggest right here, to write in the word title insurance. Title insurance is something that we obviously recommend. All lenders are going to have some type of title insurance, but there's a lot of people putting a lot of money down right now. If you put $100,000 or if you put $20,000, you need to have an owner's policy, not just the policy for the loan. So you might want to, we've got a couple of some information, some brochure I could send out to you on the difference in the title insurance versus homeowners insurance and all, so you know about that, because you definitely want them to, particularly those that are putting so much money into it now, that they would have owner's title insurance. And with our firm, we have, there's a joint venture of title insurance through a Heritage Title, and you'll be asked to do a disclosure that you presented that to your clients. So again, that you're educating the sellers. That would be a buyer form. It's not a seller form, but you want to make them aware of it. And it talks about survey. Now, this is the little form that I wanted to, one last thing, is this septic or sewer and water. This is really not a complicated form. It's a worksheet, guys. It's just something to give you guidance as to how you're going to know if it's what you're going to advertise. Because if you advertise one of these incorrectly, it can be very, very pricey, and it causes a lot of problems for all of us. So if you will verify what the seller tells you, it will be to your advantage and ours as well. In this situation, you would be the listing agent, right? So you're going to check right here where it says agent has verified. I want you to initial right here, because you really should either get a recent utility bill, and on that utility bill, you want to verify there's water service and there is sewer service and stormwater. If that does not say sewer service, they don't have sewer service. So that tells you right then that you've got to go right down here and find out about a private septic system. They most likely have a septic tank, even if the seller tells you they have public sewer. And yes, we've had that happen. But if you call the utility company, that's, first of all, you didn't get the utility bill, then you're going to call the utility company and you want to find out, is the service available? And is the service connected or it's not connected? You see, sometimes, particularly on a sewer lines, they may put sewer lines in after the properties were built, and some people opt not to pay the tap fee and connect. So they still have a septic, although the houses right around it might be saying that some public sewer. So you need to verify, is the surface available and is it connected? Or maybe I should say it the other way around. Is it connected, and if it's not connected, then is it even available? So this is primarily what you're going to do. Every now and then, you're going to already know that it's a septic system. And if you know it's a septic system, you're going to follow the rules down here. This is where you're going to call the Environmental Health Services Department in the county where the property is located. Let's say you call Environmental Health in Union County. You're going to ask for the permit, and they're going to say, send me a fax. Well, I can tell you the fax request sheet is on KW Resources, but it's just as easy for them to send you one. Most of the counties don't tell you that, but Union County does. So you want to get that permit if it's available. If the property is over 6 years old, it's probably not going to be available because they only keep records, but you need to call, verify it, make sure that you put the information right here that it wasn't available. And then in your listing remarks, note, no permit available. All right. That shows you look for it. There is not one available. So buyer's agents, be alert that you need to get it inspected. That's what you're saying. But you're also protecting your seller, that you verified it wasn't available. And so therefore he's not responsible for telling you that it's a 4-bedroom house when the permit, had it been available, would have said 3 bedrooms. That's where you get into trouble for misadvertising if you put 4 bedrooms and the permit says 3. All right, darlings, I have kept you over, and thank you so much for giving me this extra time. This is just the explanation of what I just told you. Okay, so I think, and if you want to use the net sheet, obviously you certainly, there's 2 or 3 different net sheets. I always try to give an estimate of net sheets. So I think we just about did it, and then some. I probably overwhelmed you with a lot of stuff today, but thank you for your patience at the beginning as we tried to find these forms. And it's been so good to get to see all of you today. And we'll be back next Thursday with taking care of North Carolina buyers. And I look forward to seeing you then. God bless. See ya.
Thank you, Sabra.
You're certainly welcome. Bye. And you know, my email is sabraromeo@kw.com. If you want to email me, or I'll ask you any other questions. Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
You are certainly welcome. It's nice to meet you today.
Likewise.